Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first monthly session on Robot Cloud. Our goal here is to share information about Robot Cloud and collect feedback and ideas from you. I'm Ben Greiner, president of Forget Computers, and joining me today is Chad Nielsen, our lead engineer on Robot Cloud. Chad,
Hey
can you
there.
say hi? Hey.
I did.
Okay. Today we're going to talk about OS upgrades. We all know that El Capitan is due out next Wednesday, September 30th. And what can we do to prepare for it, and how can Robot Cloud help? By the way, next Wednesday, I'll be at the European Mac sysadmin conference in Sweden. So if anyone else on the call will be there, please let me know. First, I'd like to hear from those of you joining us today. Will any of you encourage your end users to install El Capitan next Wednesday? Maybe you can raise your hand and let me know if you'll be doing that. I know we will not. We will be actually discouraging our clients from installing it on day one. At least that seems to be the trend recently. Ever since Apple made the upgrade free, I feel like they kind of did a disservice to us in the IT world by making OS upgrades free, because we all know OS upgrades can be a domino effect of issues if not handled properly. And we were kind of taken by surprise that first year Apple made the upgrade free. And of course, what happened? A bunch of people upgraded and suddenly wanted other things fixed that were broken. And it simply wasn't possible because we were waiting on Adobe, we're waiting on print drivers, you name it. So what we did, Chad, did we do this with 10.9? Was that the first time we blocked an OS upgrade? 10.10?
It is. 10.9 was the first time.
Okay.
Yep.
So 10.9. So with 10.9, we blocked the upgrade and we prohibited our customers from installing the upgrade, and we plan to do that again. Obviously, the client has the ability to opt out of that if they so choose. We just want them to understand what that means. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about blocking and how that works. Chad, can you speak a little bit about how Robot Cloud blocks an OS upgrade?
Yeah, absolutely. So on every Mac, we have something called launch daemons. When a block is in place, it is a launch daemon that checks every minute to see if a specific application or process is running. If it does find the process is running, we have a couple different options on how to approach it. Most of the time, users or clients will want to just terminate or quit the process. We can also delete the offending process or app, tied to that. We can display a message to the user as well, letting them know that this piece of software has been either blocked or otherwise has been restricted in their environment. And finally, we can also generate an alert so that, say you don't have a message to the end user, it just quits, or maybe you do all of the above, you can get an email detailing which machine ran it at which time, so that if there is, say, a persistent issue of the user attempting to do this, that it can be addressed on a more personal level.
Right, and just to warn you, we try to let our clients know through we have primary contacts at every location. We try to let them know, hey, the upgrade's coming. Please don't run it. Here's why, and then we're going to, block unless you choose not to. And in fact, this year I think we're going to create a form, or I would have liked to have done it, by now, but I think by the end of this week we can have a form put together, and I can share that with any of our Robot Cloud customers, where we're basically going to let our primary contacts know that we're going to be blocking it, and if they want to opt out, here's a form you can fill out to opt out. And just to also heads up, we try to communicate very hard with our customers, not just Robot Cloud, but our end users, because we support end users as well. And the block, sometimes offends people a little bit if they don't see it coming, especially on a Sunday afternoon when they decided that they're going to run, the upgrade. But Chad, would you agree? I don't think we've ever had anyone, remain upset with us after we explained, why the block was in place. Would you agree?
Exactly. Sometimes users get very excited about a new operating system upgrade. They read a feature on a blog or somewhere else, and then they are like, I want that feature, or my iOS device is updated. Let me update my Mac as well so I can go ahead and use this new thing. I know that in Yosemite, the handoff feature between iOS devices and the Mac was coveted. People wanted it, but they wanted it before the rest of their machine had been essentially tidied up and applications purchased or upgraded before the install happened. So any user that would want to go ahead and upgrade themselves pretty much risked breaking their work machine in ways that would make them unproductive.
Right. And let's walk through a recent upgrade process that we've gone through with Yosemite, and we assume the process will be the same for El Capitan. although Apple sometimes changes things and we have to make changes on the fly. But what we typically do is, in an ideal situation, we try to plan the upgrade with the customer. Make sure that they have that they're prepared for it, and we use dashboard to look at the age of the machine, how much hard drive space is available, um, the applications that are installed. Sometimes you don't want to install an OS upgrade if an old version of Office or Creative Suite or Font Manager is running. So we try to really evaluate whether or not they're ready for the upgrade, and assuming they are, then we want to communicate a message to them. I'm going to share a recent file that we shared with our customers. And it's pretty basic, and the idea is that the primary contact shares this with their end users or everyone in the office. And in this example, we want to make them aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what they might run into. And in this case, they were going to run into a password change issue. So, Chad, what I wanted to ask you is, after we've evaluated whether an office can handle an upgrade or individual machines in an office, and we make it available to them through Robot Cloud, so we lift the block, walk us through what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. So when the upgrade has been approved for an environment and the client is ready for it, the way we typically like to get a client upgraded is to cache the installer, which happens automatically in the background, the user is unaware, so that that entire upgrade process happens much more quickly. What will happen is that the client workstation will check in. It'll find that, hey, I'm supposed to be caching the updater. It comes from either the Robot Cloud cloud distribution point, or if you have set up a local distribution point, which I believe we'll probably talk about in another webinar session later on if you haven't already done that. The file is downloaded and saved on the Mac, just essentially sits there until they're ready. Once that caching is complete, then in self-service, a button will appear stating, upgrade to Yosemite. And the user or yourself or whomever can click that button to begin the upgrade process. But that button will not appear until the download is fully complete.
Right, and we started the caching process with Yosemite basically because we were having issues where so many people are traveling, so many people are working from home, so many people are on Wi-Fi networks that are not ideal, that even if we lifted the block and they proceeded with installing the upgrade, it could sometimes take a really long time. So we want that to be primed and ready to go, so they feel that it's a very fast experience and a fast install. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about why I use Robot Cloud to perform an upgrade versus the App Store, because we know the App Store is there. That's how Apple's pushing people to upgrade, and that's how a lot of users are doing it if they don't have something like Robot Cloud. So, Chad, can you talk a little bit about the difference between using Robot Cloud and using the App Store for an upgrade?
Oh, certainly. The App Store, clearly is a manual process. At least on one machine, you would need to sign in with an Apple ID to obtain the installer. You could do that per machine, or you could copy it to a flash drive and then in front of each machine, double-click it, run through the installer, and then wait for it to restart. If it's FileVault encrypted, you'll have to wait, type in its password, and then essentially let the install continue from there. So it is very manual. We don't like manual things whatsoever. So with Robot Cloud, we automate the download, of course, and the install, so that there's nothing needed there. There's no Apple ID required for Robot Cloud to use Yosemite. So that takes out another variable or another time decrease. We can, if you want, bypass FileVault during the installation as well. So if a user, say you initiate a download or you initiate the install and a user computer restarts, we can bypass that screen so that when the install is complete, it is sitting at the login screen waiting for the user to sign in once they've been upgraded. Those restarts
and
Chad,
during the sorry to interrupt, I want to mention that that's pretty big for us, because we don't tend to not go on site for upgrades anymore like we used to.
Yeah, fair.
We're remote, and as you can imagine, trying to upgrade a machine remotely that is restarting and then prompting the user to authenticate, especially if they have FileVault. There's just no easy way to do that remotely using a manual method. So that's really huge, the way Robot Cloud handles that process. By bypassing the Apple ID, we don't need to know the user's Apple ID. We don't want to know the user's Apple ID. We don't want to enter our own Apple ID to do that, obviously. So we bypass that. They run the upgrade. They're not prompted. We're not prompted upon restart to continue the upgrade. And that's just a much better experience for everyone.
Exactly. And once the computer reboots, even if it's sitting at the login screen, additional actions begin to trigger if there's any software that, say, has not been installed or requires Yosemite to actually work. For example, a printer driver. Once you upgrade from, say, 10.9 to 10.10, a lot of times you have to reinstall printer drivers or update them. With Robot Cloud and Actions, it will determine, hey, this Mac is on 10.10. It requires this driver now, and it can upgrade it while the computer is at that login screen. So if the user has stepped away, gone to lunch, or if it's done after hours, when they come in, under most circumstances, they can just sign in with their usual account password and then begin to work.
Yeah, that's really nice. So speaking of follow-up upgrades, let's talk a little bit about the Apple patches, especially around their iLife and iWork apps, because those we do treat a little differently, right?
Yep. For the Apple patches, for the main, the base OS, those are easy to patch. They don't require any kind of Apple ID sign-in. And even things like iTunes are not part of an Apple ID, as you may well know. So those all get patched automatically.
Speaking of iTunes, I think that's the main reason why people upgrade. But
it can be in some cases if they've waited too long, yeah. There is still a barrier when it comes to updating iLife and iWork applications. Although now iPhoto is gone and Photos is in place in Yosemite, there are still different applications that do require an Apple ID to be signed in. When you run an upgrade of the operating system, that Apple ID sign-in doesn't stick. So before those apps can be updated automatically, there is one manual step, if you use those apps, where you have to sign in with the associated Apple ID for that machine, and then when that login is saved, then updates can continue to be run automatically. There is one workaround if those Apple IDs are not known, and you still want to make sure those apps are updated. And again, I'm only talking about iLife and iWork apps. We can deploy those applications without them being tied to any kind of an Apple ID so that they are fully current after the upgrade. The barrier there, or not necessarily a barrier, but something to be aware of, is that if you use this approach, you get the fully up-to-date version of the app and it's ready to use, but the Apple App Store will flag it as needing an update, even though it's not tied to an Apple, or even though it's up to date, because it's not tied to an Apple ID. So there is something in the Apple operating system where it is actually checking to see, hey, this is actually an App Store app, but I don't see it as being associated with this email address, and it will it won't prompt you to do that, but if a user goes to App Store, it'll show up as something that's still available, even though it is fully patched. We try to discourage our clients from using that approach and just signing in with an Apple ID so that process can be, more in line with what Apple is going toward.
Right. And now, I think upcoming with El Capitan and VPP, we might have the ability to get around some of these issues, but that's still just talk, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, the talk is there, but not enough of those services are finished for me to actually test it to verify that it's going to work, as I really hope it does.
Yeah, right.
If anyone has not seen what upgrading self-service or upgrading to Yosemite through self-service would be like and would want to see that, we could show that as well.
Do you want
a level of interest first? Yeah.
Do you want to show that now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and give it a shot.
Okay, let's do that. Let's. I'm going to give
It'll be real fast.
I'm going to give you the screen. And I want to encourage everyone on the call to either send me a question now or send us a question later, support@forgetcomputers.com. And in fact, if you do want to block El Capitan from running on your machines and you're a Robot Cloud customer, let us know. Obviously, we're not going to block by default unless we hear from you. We're going to block our own customers by default and ask them to opt out. And we could do the same for you, but we want to hear from you. If you don't contact us, we're just going to let it run, and what happens, is what happens. So I see your screen, Chad. Looking
Okay,
at
cool.
self-service. Yeah.
So this is Mavericks inside of a virtual machine on my computer. And what I did before our webinar is I went ahead and cached it, and instead of waiting for it to happen automatically, I used one of our commands, just a policy check-in, for it to download it and essentially update its inventory within Robot Cloud. From a local distribution point, this takes about 3 minutes to cache, and it's, I think, about 5.6 gig. And this is assuming, of course, you have a gigabit network. If it's caching over wireless, or if you're caching from the cloud, it could be up to 15 minutes or even up to an hour if they're on a DSL connection. But again, this part that you see in terminal is something that happens behind the scenes. I show it to you now just to let you know that if you didn't want to wait and you wanted to cache a bunch of stuff in advance, you can do it manually as well. But nonetheless, after I'd cached it, this button for Upgrade to Yosemite did appear. And all I'll need to do is click on Upgrade. And we have a warning here. Go ahead and make sure that your files are backed up, because of course your Mac is going to be restarting. I'll click on Upgrade. And what's going to happen is that it's going to take that file, it's going to begin the installer, and then boot to the recovery hard drive and begin the installation. So I can let this roll. It'll probably be a few minutes for it to finish and start the restart, and then you'll see the progress bar for OS 10 upgrade.
Yeah, and we've done this on several hundred machines very successfully. Of course, as with any upgrade, no matter how it's performed, we occasionally run into surprises, whether it's a hard drive failing in the middle of the upgrade or something of that nature. So I just want to keep in mind that this is great, this is fantastic, it automates, but the repercussions of an upgrade are still there.
Install had just kicked off, so there we go.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to hear us talk about, we have, going forward, we are going to have a topic like this once a month about Robot Cloud. But if there's anything in particular you would like to hear us talk about, please let us know. You can open up a request. Once again, support@forgetcomputers.com. I think we've covered everything that I wanted to cover, and we're keeping this to less than 30 minutes. That was the goal. So we don't take up too much of your time. So if there are no more questions, I'll let this seminar run through this upgrade process, just so we can see it complete.
Exciting, yeah.
But it's not anything too big. The one other thing I will share is I do have a document that is kind of related to upgrade that a friend of mine shared with me today. I'll throw it in the handout again here. It's just an image, and you can see I've fuzzed out who the customer is, but this was how they handled the recent iOS 9 upgrade. They basically on their web portal for internally ask everyone to not upgrade to iOS 9. And I thought it was kind of interesting. They said, this approach, or they say industry best practices recommend users not upgrade to the latest release of an operating system until a subsequent update is released. And for OS, for us, Chad, I think we often, historically, have waited like 3 updates. Would you say?
There have been times where we have waited. I think it was 10.10.2 when we felt enough of the bugs had been patched for us to roll it out to our own client base, because we have to support these people. We don't want to generate unnecessary traffic. Additionally, there were some things that just took a long time to drop in Yosemite, such as like some fiery printers and other configs of that nature. Font managers took a little while.
Yeah. Font
it seems like even though that Apple delivers a beta program, a public beta, or with the regular developer program, people could get this stuff in advance. Some developers don't. So we're kind of at their mercy.
Yeah, or Apple changes something in the last minute, and then they have to scramble to make that change.
No,
So,
that never happens.
yeah. I mean, it feels like Apple's getting better, but just as soon as I decide that they're they're trustworthy, and this happened with one of the, I think, iOS 8 updates, I applied to my phone, and suddenly my phone was no longer a phone for the next 24 hours as I waited for Apple to release a fix, and they pulled that update. But the other thing they say in this screen grab I shared was that this approach of waiting lets consumers, which I think is a key word here, consumers test the new operating system. And that's why I try to stress to our customers, you do not want to be testing this stuff at work. Test it on your home machine or your phone if you don't need it to be a phone, when we're talking about iOS. But on the Mac side, don't test it in a professional work environment on a workflow that you rely on. Let others do that. And by letting others test it, it will, as it says here, bring to light any unexpected system performance issues and also provide the vendor with an opportunity to release appropriate patches, which we've talked about extensively here. So, okay, well, it looks like we got 15 minutes to go on this VM. We're not going to keep everyone online to watch this.
It's so exciting.
But yeah, Chad, when you figure out how to make an OS upgrade take less than 30 seconds live, we'll do another webinar.
Through magic of QuickTime, yes, indeed.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us. Once again, feel free to continue reaching out to us with any questions, and hopefully we'll see you next month. Bye.
All right, thank you. Bye.